I went in to take responsibility for my country's war making. So in Talisman Sabre, we're preparing for future invasions of countries like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan that killed 1.3 million people, according to the Physicians for Social Responsibility, and we're preparing to do it again. So I went in to try and slow that process down. So it says on our charge sheets that we interrupted Talisman Sabre, is that right? Interrupted? That we interrupted exercise Talisman Sabre. Yesterday was a big media day for Talisman Sabre. 500 US and Australian troops landed. It was a 7-month planning apparently, and we managed to get close to where it happened and bring just a bit of media attention to the other side, that these wars don't actually answer anything, they just create more problems. So the troops jumping out is one image, saying here's what solves problems, is wars and violence, and we were able to convey messages that these actually don't bring solutions. We need to work together to find real answers and real solutions to these problems, and not more wars, which then create more wars and violence.
Yeah, why did you go in, son?
So I went in because I've become more aware, I guess, of the costs of war on soldiers, and in particular, I guess, this idea of moral injury. That very often it's the cost to soldiers of what they see and what they have to do, and the sorts of situations that we place them in. And so wanting to talk a bit with them by doing the Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ, with them, sharing that with them, and talking with them about what it is like to have, bodies broken and blood shed, and to be sharing in that together, and to perhaps find some ways forward together that don't involve those kinds of costs on them.
I went in to help all of us start to ask the question, is war worth the cost? Whether we're government officials or policymakers or military leaders or ordinary Australians, just to ask this question, is war worth the cost that we've been paying, whether that's financially through the millions and billions of dollars that we've spent, or whether that's through soldiers' lives that have been lost or harmed or affected in their families, or whether that's through the countless men, women and children overseas who have been killed or harmed during our use of violence. And so it was our hope that we could help Australia ask that question, and to start to discuss whether what we're doing is right, and whether what we're doing is actually working, because we've been doing it since 2001. I think it's time we ask the question, is this working anymore? And so our action was to try and get onto a military facility and ask questions like that of soldiers, but also of the entire Australian community.
What got in there?
So when we went in to the area, we were found by some soldiers, and we invited them to share the Eucharist with us, because we wanted to share that meal, the bread and the wine together, and to reflect on bodies broken and bloodshed together. And so we did that. They decided not to join with us for that, but we, the three of us together, shared that meal, and we continued to talk with the soldiers from there until they removed us. We had some really good discussions, actually, particularly at the gate with some of the soldiers, both about wars and the cost of wars to them, and I guess their roles and the ways that they see their role in society, but also just things like footy and family, and all of the sorts of things that make up life together. So that was some of the stuff that we were wanting to share.
Awesome. So do you feel good about that you got to share that?
Absolutely.
How do you feel about what you've shared?
I think very often we're segregated from one another in different spaces, and so it's really good, I think, for us to realise that we're on the same page. That none of us actually want the sorts of death and destruction on the scale that we've seen in the last 10 years, and so actually we share much more than we differ on, and so it's about how we together come to some conclusions on the things we differ on, and wrestling through those together in conversation, sharing meals and those sorts of things.
So when we went in, we walked on the Shoalwater Bay military training area, and we had the permission of the Darumbal people, and we were hoping to make it to one of the sacred sites in the region. Okay, so when we went on to Shoalwater Bay military training area, before that I'd asked the permission and gotten the blessings of the Darumbal people who owned the land, I believe. And we had undertaken a pilgrimage, which for me as a Christian, I was particularly interested in the war making on the land. The first wars that happened there when the Darumbal people were driven off, and also the war making that was being prepared on the land for other people's homes. So I was interested in how we can draw attention to that and maybe slow it down. I was mainly interested in what's my Christian response in this time of war. We're spending all this money on war. People are scared about things happening in the Middle East. What's the Christian non-violent response to that? Before we go in, all guns blazing, and create more problems for ourselves and for the people over there. I was undertaking a pilgrimage of Christian peacemaking.
So when we went on to the military facility, we encountered several soldiers, and just near the landing zone for the paratroopers, we were aware that there was a parachute drop happening that day of US and Australian soldiers, and we encountered the soldiers at that particular point. And we spent some time with them there, talking about war and peace. We also got to share communion with them. We broke bread and drank wine, which is a Christian symbol of Jesus' body and blood, who came to say that we should not do any more violence to one another anymore, that we should love our neighbour and care for our neighbour, and that includes our neighbours overseas as well. And so we shared the bread and the wine, and after that we were taken away to be arrested. At that point we encountered some more soldiers, and we had some more good conversations. In fact, the soldiers we met there were very young and very intelligent and very passionate about what they were doing in working for the military. And it really almost broke my heart with some of those conversations with those young people, thinking these are the kinds of young people who have energy and passion to give to our country, and who are now being sent overseas and tragically could potentially have been harmed and killed in conflict zones around the world. And so what can these young people provide Australia? I think they can provide a lot more than what they've been asked to give.
So Talisman Sabre is a war exercise that is supposed to help Australia be more interoperable with the US. This year, for the first time, they're using Japanese forces as well as New Zealand forces. Talisman Sabre is a war exercise in which Australian military, taxpayer-funded military assets are incorporated into the US war machine. We're using New Zealand troops and Japanese troops for the first time, and this is all about preparing for a war with China. China is so angry they responded with their own war games called China Sea. So what we're seeing is the US rehearsing for a war, China rehearsing for a war, and nothing could be more dangerous than for the US and China to go to war and for Australia to be in the middle of it. So we need to find a much better way to sort out our problems than fighting and bombing and killing each other, because in the end it's going to cost us all.
The myth that Talisman Sabre and these kind of practices where we're dropping soldiers from the sky just goes to show that we're actually practicing for invasion and not necessarily practicing for defence. And a lot of Australians just think that these exercises and the Australian military is all about defence, whereas what we've seen over the past decade is that Australia and US troops have been invading other countries on a constant basis, and this is really where our taxpayer money is going, and we need to ask, is this where we want our money and our time and effort and energy to go towards invading other countries?